Legal Internet. It's Matt. It's Paul, where'd he go? Paul is actually off doing a show this evening. So he is at the Greenhouse Theater here in Chicago. Deck chairs on the Titanic. It's going to be playing all month if you want to see Paul singing. I don't know if he's dancing. Maybe. Yes. So, Paul, break a leg. Not literally. In the meantime, we're talking about Legion, Season 2, Episode 10, Chapter 18. So, yeah, I guess I will, Paul, I'll do this on my own. Okay, so this is the penultimate episode of the season. We got the season finale coming up. It's a big deal. Right off the bat, we got this giant reveal in this episode, which was we got to see basically full-on Legion from the comic books. It's, I assume, the dystopian future that Future Sid's been talking about. And when she's like, when David's like, am I dead in the future? And he's like, it's complicated. This is the complicated thing. So he's sitting in a temple, and there's bones all over the place, and he's on a throne, and he's got the hair, and he's got the costume that you see in the comic books, and he's holding a crystal ball, and he's looking at Sid. Now, amazing. Interestingly, on the floor, kind of laying on the ground, Lenny looks like Lenny's pregnant. Now, assuming that's Lenny / his sister, Amy, of course, adopted sister, but still, a little weird that she's pregnant. I assume through David. I don't know. That's odd. But anyway, that's the dystopian future that everyone's headed for if David kills Farouk. So, now we go back, theoretically, in time to the events that are occurring prior to finding Farouk's body. I should mention, and I'll follow up on this, but this episode is definitely, if you're in the it's all in his head camp, this episode is definitely for you. Okay, so we have Sid is, they were last we saw them, they were in a tent, and they saw like the bones of their bodies, and apparently they decided to sleep there. I don't know. I probably wouldn't, but they do. Sid gets up in the morning, and David's still asleep in the tent. She sees this, they're in this, Le Désolé, and there's this big hole in the ground, and there's a giant pink tub stopper with a chain on it. She walks over, boopy-doopy-doopy-doop. A white rabbit comes out on a hook. It's basically like a fishing line that Farouk is sending up. She, of course, takes the hook off of the bunny, which it's a live bunny. Like, damn. Anyway, and then the hook grabs her and pulls her back like she would, like a fish. Interesting, obvious Alice in Wonderland thing there, right? You've got a hole in the ground that goes on forever, and you've got a white rabbit, and they're pulling Sid down into Wonderland. There, she is confronted by Melanie, who is basically being controlled by Farouk. So it's Farouk in Melanie's body. And most of that episode is spent with Farouk / Melanie trying to convince Sid, yep, David's the monster. Just got these little reflecting pools that are showing scenes from David's past, reminding him about the times when he promised no more secrets, then showing him kissing future Sid, then showing the conversation with that future Sid had with Farouk, where Farouk was like, oh, I'm not the monster, it's David's the monster in the future? Oh. And we also see David in the present, he wakes up out of the tent, where Sid goes all, tries to find Sid, finds the temple of the Migo monks. In the temple is Oliver. David assumes it's Farouk in Oliver's body, which he's been all season, and starts to torture him for the Sid's location. As it turns out, it's not Farouk, it's just Oliver, yet who's been mind-controlled and somewhat manipulated into pretending to be Farouk, essentially. And so, Farouk as Melanie is using David's torture. He's using a drill. Well, David takes does a little boop and takes Oliver into the astral plane to torture him. So he's torturing him mentally, but the physical manifestation of it is he's using a drill into his knees and like his kneecaps. It's pretty gruesome stuff, and the screaming is just like, "Hoy!" Whew. So Farouk shows Sid, "Oh, look, this is your boyfriend. Look how sadistic he is," and he seems to be really enjoying this moment of torturing Oliver. One thing that was a little weird about this episode, the reflecting pools was part of this, is it repurposed a lot of footage. It seemed a little bit of a cheat. So we saw, a lot of that Farouk talking about who's the monster and who's the hero. And we saw, David with future Sid. And earlier in the episode, we saw a repeat of Sid talking to Clark when she's telling him about, no, my boyfriend he doesn't know the difference between reality and what's not. We also saw a repeat of Lenny when she and her car show up in Le Desolé and the car's on fire. And we saw that replay itself. So they seem like I don't know. It was like, let's stick with some new footage here. But also the reflecting pools themselves, it's a weird gimmick when you show actual footage in a reflecting pool. Like, why is it switching camera angles? Was there a producer in the moment of this reflecting pool? It's like, oh, I think the pool should show it from the other side. It's a little off-putting. It's not horrible. It is what it is. They're like, all right, let's show that scene again. So they did. So Sid's being convinced, seeing David as sadistic as he is in that moment is starting to turn her to like, he's not a monster, right? It's interesting how, Melanie, one of the tells I would think for Sid would be that Melanie can watch Oliver being tortured. And she says like, it isn't bothering you? I think Sid realizes it's Farouk, but in some ways she's still falling for it. She's still kind of, she's still hooked like she was with the White Rabbit. It's like, Sid, come on now, hang in there. He's showing you exactly what he wants to bring you in line, pull you onto Team Farouk. One of the things that Melanie / Farouk mentions, it's the first time we hear the word Legion, which is the title of the show. So they announce it. And it's like Melanie says, yep, in the future, he's the monster. She says something like, he'll become magnificent. Another clue that it's Farouk and not Melanie talking. But he'll be Legion, the world killer, wearing his vest with his straight up hair. So that was pretty awesome. We've now announced that's where the future's heading potentially. Legion, world killer. So, in the middle of all that, Melanie decides it's time to resurrect Farouk. So, this hole in the ground, leads to there's a maze with the Minotaur. We'll talk about the Minotaur in a second. But there's a Minotaur, and then the maze somehow ends up maybe it's under the temple, or somehow it's all connected, so that she finds Farouk's body in the egg. Basically gives him the kiss of life. She's kind of like Prince Charming, but she gives the kiss of life. You see this light come up, like, the sun rises. Farouk awakens. She drops. Now, I don't think she's dead. Well, we don't see her after that, but she drops. Maybe she's no longer under Farouk's control at that moment. But I feel like in another storyline, I think she would give her life for his. It seems very fairy tale-ish. But we'll assume that she just passed out. So Farouk, in his old body, wakes up. In fact, this is very much this is kind of an end of the Act 2 type thing. This is the Empire Strikes Back moment, because you've got Farouk against everybody's better judgment. Farouk's got his own body back. He thwarts Clark and the team that's going to bring out the choke, which I'll talk about. So that's out of the picture. David has tortured Oliver and has kind of missed the boat here on stopping Farouk. So all the plans seem to be, awry at this point. So they're going to have to try to come back together for what will be some form of a victory at the end of the season, which what that victory looks like, I'm not exactly sure. So you've got this Minotaur that we first saw in Melanie's delusion. This is back earlier in the season, and it's like a crippled Minotaur, a Minotaur with a walker. I can only assume that's part of. It's like a nightmare image that Melanie possesses, her fears perhaps condensed into this Minotaur creature. When Farouk took over her mind, I'm guessing that he was then able to take her nightmare creature and take it under control, so that once he's got his body, he is able to uncripple the Minotaur. So the Minotaur grows big and strong. It's now been given like Farouk abilities, so it can crawl on ceilings, and it takes out a bunch of the Vermilions, the little mustache women, and some of the monks. But at the end, Carrie with a K has shown up. With Carrie with a C, they use the tracker to find the car, which is now burned up. They then find the hole in the ground, and then from the hole come the monks, who are now under control of Farouk. They had safes on their heads in the beginning of the episode. They had a little conversation with Lenny, where Lenny's like, "Where's the temple?" And they just all point, but they've all got. So I assume the safes were an attempt to keep their brains safe from Farouk's influence. But by this time in the episode, the safes are off. They're now completely under Farouk's control, and they're minions. And they have these bolo whips that make sounds that make people, make their nose bleed and make them throw up. Basically, it's like some kind of a force wave type power. Probably similar to the choke, which we find later, which is a giant tuning fork. You hit it, and it stops mutant powers, or at least temporarily. That's the idea, is that they're going to try to use it to restrain Farouk. Farouk gets to the choke, sends it magically away, and we see it just fly off into the distance, never to be seen again, probably. But yeah, so these monks come out of the hole. They're swinging the bolo whips. They take out Clark's men that way, or excuse me, Carrie with a C and the men, but Carrie with a K takes her bow staff, has a fight, kind of like a Kill Bill moment, where she's just squaring off with a bunch of folks. Looks pretty cool. It's a good fight scene. Kicks one of the guys back down the hole, and then more come out. It's kind of this continuing wave that she has to keep fighting. Eventually, she does defeat basically all the monks with the help of Lenny, who is picking them off with a sniper rifle from a distance. They have a brief moment where Carrie and Lenny meet up, and I'm like, oh, that would be kind of an interesting conversation. They kind of just gloss over it, like, oh, thanks, got it, I gotta go. Carrie with K jumps down the hole. Looks a little CGI-y, whatever. See, it's fine, but it just, they could have spent a little more time in the editing bay on that one. But she gets to the bottom of the hole. She's in the maze. She finds Sid. She's like, oh, at least I finally found someone. The Minotaur shows up at that moment, and the two of them square off against the Minotaur. Sid says, I feel like hitting something. And she proceeds to get in a fight with Minotaur, and she's kind of, getting it handed to her. And I'm thinking, you're not really known for combat. I can see why Carrie with a K would fight, but Sid, her main power is glove off, touch a thing, transfer. But I don't know why she hasn't transferred with it yet. I assume that's coming. Maybe she'll become the Minotaur temporarily in the next episode. But what we see is the Minotaur's basically got her down, and it's like what's going to happen next? And we don't see what happens next. Maybe this is where she loses her arm. Something with the Minotaur. So the Minotaur is dealing with Carrie and Sid. Farouk has dispatched the Vermilions. Actually, it's a great scene there where the Vermilions, who have just carried the choke up to this high point, they see Farouk and estimating chances of success, 0% chance of success, and they run away. Which, hey, if you have 0% chance of success, that makes, I suppose, the most sense. David been torturing Oliver. Carrie with a C finds David still in the temple. Oliver's body is on the floor, although Oliver is not dead. Carrie with the C says, "Oh, look, he's going to be okay." David says basically he's worried because he's imagining all the ways that he's going to kill Farouk, and he's enjoying the idea of it. He's realizing that he's kind of giving into this notion of Legion, perhaps. Melanie, when she's making the case to Sid about how David's the monster, keeps bringing up, she's like, look, it's not his fault, really. Look at all the ways that he was, just basically, he's insane. He was insane, and he was given the gift of this parasite that magnified his powers, but he's basically insane, and he's been abused, and his life has just been one big abusive construct, and the result is a monster. And when we see Farouk standing on the hillside as the sun comes up, we're hearing the poem that David would be read at night as he went to sleep. It's the angriest boy in the world who chopped up his mom, I think. And the very last thing we see is Farouk stretching out, and then we see it looks like David in the same spot, because we see the sun coming up, and he says, "Boo," and we're out. Also, interestingly, when David is torturing Oliver, Oliver says, "You can't torture me. I'm part of you." And at one point, David hits him, and then he turns into David momentarily. So this is where it's all in his head, folks, of which I'm at least in that partially in that camp. It's all in his head, folks, can look at this episode and go, aha, see? And here's how. We know, so we've finally been told Legion, world killer. We saw Legion in the future, hair. The manifestation of Legion, as he is in the comics, is a collection of personalities, of which he can just kind of, he controls them, so he can jump into a particular personality at any particular moment. We have not seen that take place in the show yet, but now we've heard his name, Legion. And there's these references. Oliver saying, "I'm part of you," and he becomes David momentarily. Farouk standing on the hillside looks like, when it cuts back from the other side, it's David. David says, "Boo." We've been hearing all about these different delusions through the parables, which we didn't get a parable this time again. Very good in my case, but still, there are just these different references. Plus, there's the fact that it's a hole in the ground with a giant pink stopper with a chain off of it, and monks sitting on the ground with safes on their heads, and a minotaur in the bottom of a maze with a bunch of pools of water, and how would it not be in someone's head? So there's a ton of dream imagery. There's a ton of different, seeming like aspects of David, perhaps in manifesting themselves. So, boy, if they just turn it into this was all in his head moment, it could come. If it's this next episode could be the "it's all in his head" episode. Stay tuned. I will be watching with bated breath. So yes, subscribe if you want to get some more updates from the Dork Lords. We'll be talking about Westworld next week, actually, as well. I've got my good buddy Danny, soccer nerd friend. We're gonna do a little World Cup preview. Dorks on Sports will be in effect as well. So enjoy that, and of course we'll be back for the season finale of Legion. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye now.